Hey folks, just tapping my mic here to make sure it's set to microphone. I just wanted to do I just need a mood to make some videos. So I'm actually in front of, and if the camera is shaking, it's because my cat is below us rubbing on the tripod. Okay, so she's messing around with that. But anyway, I'm actually in front of some curtains that my wife made. Bought some fabrics and everything. I thought, well, let's try that as a background. It might look a little weird, but we'll try it. Just something different to get out of the room that I normally use. And so just wanted, like I said, wanted to do some videos today. I don't know how many I'll do. Just do it until I grow tired of it, I guess. Maybe a few minutes worth. But what I was going to go over first is how to strum and fill in the gaps for strumming. A lot of people, ask me, or they'll tell me, I don't understand how you make it sound like there's 2 or 3 instruments. You're playing 2 or 3 guitars. How do you do that? And it seems like I may have covered this in another video, or maybe during a course that I taught where I teach guitar at. I'm not sure. But I thought, well, that'd be good, something good to go over. And this is more of an advanced technique. And it has a lot to do with your upstrokes and your downstrokes while you're strumming. If you haven't watched my How to Tighten Your Strumming video on YouTube, I definitely encourage you to watch that one before you get into this one, because that goes over some of the nuances and finesse in getting a good bluegrass strumming sound. Okay, so let's go into doing some of this. A lot of this is mainly your picking. Okay, now if you're strumming, and once again, I covered some of this, I think, in that strumming video I just mentioned. But if you're strumming, just a basic strum, a bass strum, you're going bass, strum, bass, strum. You'll notice there are no upstrokes in that, but you'll also notice that to come up and go down, you have to come up first. I'm coming up, coming up, coming up. Okay, now I usually recommend beginner students start out with that kind of strum first, whether it's just straight down strokes or adding a bass strum in there, whichever way. But that's one of the basic strums. Now, to add to that, on those upstrokes, while we're coming up, we just hit a few strings along the way, because I have to come up anyway to go back down. So why not on the way up, just barely grab a couple of those strings, just barely graze them. And I'm not aiming for a full 6-string strum. I'm not aiming to try to put a bunch of force into it. It's just a very small hint at maybe the bottom 3 or 4 strings, and that's it. Because notice if I strum, the bass is still ringing out. So I'm kind of creating a small gap between the bass string and around the D string area. So I'm not even hitting the A. I don't even need this finger. As long as this finger is muting the A string, I don't even need to hit that. Okay? And so a lot of filling in the gaps, when you're actually picking and soloing at the same time, strumming and soloing, that's basically what I'm getting at. A lot of people wonder how you're doing both at once or playing 2 guitars at once. A lot of that basically deals with getting that strumming hand under control. And once you do that, you just use those same techniques in between some of the fills and the runs that you have going on. Say, for example, the one I did going to a D, you could do this. Now there's a little bit of upstrokes in there, just to give you a basic strum, but you'll notice that the music completely stops whenever I go to that lick. That strumming stops, and you notice it. Your ears automatically notice something has changed, something has stopped. Then we're back into strumming. Stop, strum. Okay? So if you want that to continue on and have a good sound, as far as you don't want the music to just abruptly stop, you're going to have to use that technique I just talked about in getting some of those strums on the upstroke. Now notice this is all down, down, down. Okay? So whenever I'm usually filling in the gap, so to speak, I will go. Okay, now notice I use my pinky up here because I kind of want that ring finger to stay there because it's part of this G, the particular G I'm using. Okay, and then there, I wouldn't come up on that E string. I may, come up on the B string, or if you're playing with this G, that would work. What you could do is use the bottom 2 or 3 fingers to mute the bottom E string, which is a technique I use a lot when I don't want to play any notes on the E string. And believe it or not, there's a lot more times than not, a lot more often times that I will not want to use the bottom E string for this reason. And that is because there's notes on the other strings I want to play and not let this one ring out. So if I'm doing that, and usually, let's say I wanted to do this G because that B is going to be the same in all these little runs here. Then I'll let that E string ring out. So basically what I'm doing is I'm holding my G chord and going from the A string, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, slide that up 4th fret, and then immediately going to D. Now, you may be wondering, what about all those open strings ringing out? Isn't that going to be obnoxious and sound terrible? Not really. If you're doing this fast, most of the time, even if it's just a slow song. Let's do Amazing Grace. And let's see. It's going to be harder on a 3/4 song to do that. You might have to go. Let's see. Let me sing a little bit of it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Okay, so right there, I didn't do it between each one. I did it between the first and the second, and then just went on the rest of the way. But once again, I let that upstroke fill in the gap. Okay, so if I'm doing something like that, I will let those upstrokes. Typically, all your main notes are going to be on a downstroke. So in between those downstrokes, you can hit a few strings on the way back up to get to those. Now, even when I'm playing the individual notes, just like I said earlier, to get to that strum, I have to come up to get back down. Well, to get back down on a downstroke on a note, notice my hand has to come back up. Up. Okay, so it has to come back up to hit a downstroke. So in between that, okay, so in between that, I'm going to hit a few notes to fill in those gaps. Same thing when I'm going to C. And there, I held my ring finger down, muted my E string with these fingers. And I've said this many times too, when you're muting with your bottom fingers, when you're strumming, these fingers kind of go back and forth like this. So they get out of your way when you're strumming. Okay, and it's not an arm movement, it's a wrist movement. Okay, so the fingers are going back and forth, traveling back and forth, getting out of your way. So if you hit that E string, you're not going to be colliding with your fingers because you don't want to hold them in place. You want to actually let them flow. Like if I took my fingers off, they would naturally be going that direction too. And if I grab onto the string, they should still be able to go to that direction. So I can actually come from all the strings on the bottom, not worry about hitting that E string. And that B string is now noticeable because the E string is blocked. It's actually part of a D note. So it's actually part of a D chord, so it goes well with the G. And so it's actually part of that. It goes well with it. Now, if I'm doing a solo, let's say I'll do, let's just stick with Amazing Grace. Now, this could work with I'll Fly Away, bluegrass gospel songs, just about any song in this style. And you can work with all that. Now, I apologize if you hear any background noise. My air conditioner just cut on. And usually this mic is really pretty good about not picking up background noise, but I'm using the same one I've used for a long time, the ATR 335. I actually have a video on YouTube about that, and if you go to ericbeatty.com/shop, you can type that in the search box and find it there as well. All right, so let's do a little bit of solo Amazing Grace, and maybe you can see in between the phrases where those points to stop would be. I can insert some of this. Now let's do it just plain as we can. first of all. Okay, let's just do it. Now let's do that again with, you can hear the gaps, the music's stopping and all you're hearing is individual notes. Let's do that with some filling in the gaps with those upstroke. Now, that's not so much working on the upstrokes as it is the next step up from that, and that is maintaining a constant strum while you're playing individual notes. And a lot of that happens on the downstroke, some of it happens on the upstroke, but I like to think of it as maintaining a strum while I'm playing these notes. And that's possibly the most difficult thing to do if you're not used to playing guitar. If you're a beginner, this is going to be a little bit harder for you to grasp, but if you're an intermediate to advanced, it might not take as long to get a hold of. But that comes from just playing and years of playing by yourself, trying to make it sound more interesting, trying to beef it up a little bit. Because after a while, you're just like, I want to hear some rhythm. So you begin to supply your own. And the best way I know to tell you how to do that is just strum the song, get an idea of how it feels to strum, and then try to play the solo individually. And then try to combine them as best as you can. So for example, da da da, maybe you can even hum it. Da da da, da da da, da 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 da, and try to play that much of it. Play a little bit more than that, but you get the idea. And with that, I'm not really paying attention to which one's down, which one's up. I'm really trying to not interrupt the strumming. That's probably the best way that I can explain that, is play the song around the strumming. And to do that, sometimes you have to hold a chord shape. Most of the time, if you're doing fast soloing and licks, I tell you not to worry about a chord shape because then you're kind of hindered. But in this case, you want the strum, if you're doing a strum, you want all the notes to sound correct. So you don't want to have a bunch of random open strings flying everywhere. You want to actually have the chord tones coming through in the middle of your solo. And one thing I mentioned earlier is how do you not worry about all the open string sounds? Well, one thing was you try to keep the chord tones there as well, like I just did. I did a note, a D note that works in the G and the D chords. Another thing is, if your upstrokes, if you're not forcing them, then your upstroke is going to be more subtle, and the downstroke is where the music's going to happen. I noticed I did this earlier. Whenever you're changing a chord, now notice what happens if I slow that down. Catch what happened there? What I was doing is I was actually playing upstrokes while I was changing a chord. Okay, those open strings, you don't really notice they happen because your ear is kind of programmed to pay attention to the actual the music part of it. They're actually programmed to pay attention to the chords and the sounds that make sense. They kind of ignore those few strings that are ringing open. For one thing, it's a lighter sound. Your upstrokes should not be very heavy and forceful. And the downstrokes, especially if you hit the right bass note. Okay, so that it's kind of like a magician's trick. It's a sleight of hand. for the ear, not an eye visual trick, but an auditory trick. Your ear hears that bass note, which is what it wants to hear, and doesn't hear the in-between notes so much. Okay, so the same thing happens whenever you're playing along with a solo. You want that was just kind of a side note to get back to where I was at, and that is you want to play around the chord. So if I'm doing Amazing Grace, now notice there I'm holding this G, but I have to lift that ring finger to get that open B. Or if I want to, if I'm holding this G, I don't have to worry about that. Okay, so if I don't do it, if I do it with this G, then I've got to be aware of I need that open B every now and then. Some of those are fast downstrokes to get back to the strumming, but you want to be really relaxed. You don't want to tense this up. You don't want to force it. And what I do is, what I tell you to do, I recommend doing, is to try not to even switch your chord. Try to stay with one chord. In this case, stay with G, the chord that the key is in. And just play the tune, but don't switch to the chords. Focus on one thing at a time. For one thing, we're going to focus on just holding a G chord so that we're not tripping ourselves up trying to figure out which chords go where. So for example, that would be... Oops, I changed. It's hard not to change chords, but that way you're actually trying to find your way around with your fingers that you can manage to lift off the chords. And like this, I don't need this finger here because, like I said, I'm muting that A string. Even I can hit that, just two fingers is what I'm holding. And the rest of the A string is still muted, and the bottom, the rest of these notes go with that G. Okay? And like if I'm going to that C, I can hit both the G string on the A note and the B string on the C note. I can then lift the middle finger, because then this is a part of the C chord, so now I'm on the C chord. Or, okay? So a lot of this is trying to maintain a chord shape while you're soloing, and even if it's just one or two notes of that chord, not having all the chord, you know, your fingers anchored to everything and glued down to everything, but maintaining a chord shape while you're playing around a solo. Now, for example, you also want to know multiple places to play a chord. When I was doing the Amazing Grace first, I went, and if I don't have a chord there, I'm strumming and you got a lot of open strings ringing that don't belong there. So I have to know that this is an F shape here at the 3rd fret, and I can hold those notes down. And then just move that down back to where I can rely on some open strings, okay? So whenever you do an alternate note, notice that I'm shifting chord positions now, and I've got to know a new chord shape so that I can keep strumming. And if you got that big thumb wraparound, you can do that. I can't do that. My hand's not big enough. But I usually just try to work on the bottom strings. And especially if you're in a band or something, you got a bass player playing that bass note for you, so I don't really have to worry about hitting it as much. Okay, so I hope this has been some insightful guitar instruction for you guys. I don't want to make it a very long video. It's already up to almost 20 minutes now, so I just want to, hopefully that'll answer some of those questions that you may be having, or maybe you've been thinking about trying to integrate more flair and into your playing. And that's one of the great ways to do it, is to keep that strumming hand going while you're making while you're doing solos. Now obviously if you're playing solos down here and everything, it's kind of hard to maintain a strum because you really want to have this hand free to hit the notes you need to hit. But when you're back down to where you can hit a good decent chord shape, then you can throw the strumming in there as well. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you'd like to learn more about rhythm picking and getting that right hand in sync with that left hand, then definitely check out bluegrassguitaressentials.com, where I have a whole course dedicated to doing these things. It's available in download format. I'm trying the process right now, trying to get it converted over to Udemy. It's a slow, ongoing process, but for now you can still download them, and you can also purchase the 7-disc course on DVD. That's right now been my most popular choice, is the actual course on DVD. And if you do buy it on DVD, I just let you know, to access the files, the ebook files and the audio tracks and all that, you need to put it in your computer, and then you can open the disc on your computer and access those from there. Print those out if you want to follow along to the video when you put it in your later on in your DVD player, or if you watch it on your computer. Had a lot of people not understanding where the files come from. Well, that's where they come from. They're actually on the disc. So put the disc in your computer, and you can access them from there. Okay, so thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm gonna get off here and see what else I can come up with video-wise, and let me know what you think about the background. I'm not gonna really do this all the time, but it's nice to be in a different environment. I'm actually in the dining room with a hardwood floor and it's more kind of roomy, reverberating. And I noticed it was picking up a lot of the noise from the air conditioning and surrounding noises and stuff. So that's why I decided to use a mic on this video. But let me know what you think about it, and stay tuned for some more videos coming on your way whenever I can figure out what to do with them. All right. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. God bless.